Hey guys, and a few days ago I made a video about why Paper Mario should go in the direction of the classic games rather than the modern games because of depth, accessibility, customization, and different things like that. But I got a few comments pointing out that the modern games did have their merits, and I really should have acknowledged some of their benefits. And I do agree. I do feel like that video was a bit one-sided with how I was talking about like the classic games and the modern games. So I wanted to make a follow-up video, kind of discussing why a lot of elements from the modern games could work in a classic-style Paper Mario game, kind of building off of Thousand Year Door, and some things that I'd actually really want to see. But before we get started, I wanted to mention that I have a goal to hit 30,000 subscribers before the Switch 2 launches, so if you enjoy my content, consider subscribing, and if I hit that goal, I will give away a copy of the new Mario Kart game. But one very notable thing that is definitely compatible with the classic-style Paper Mario games are the visuals and presentation. The Thousand Year Door remake proved that the papercraft-style visuals blend really well with the pop-up book style of like the older Paper Mario games. It just looks really nice in general, and it's honestly one of the best-looking games on the Switch, in my opinion. I know there are some people who are critical of the overly papery style and think that it kind of devalues the fact that it's a Mario story, and while I definitely agree that the older Paper Mario games are canon to mainline Mario, I don't think the fact that they look like paper really takes away from that. Like, the classic games already had a very distinct art style. Like, a lot of other Mario games have very different art styles, and we don't really question how different they are from mainline Mario. Like, Mario and Luigi has a different art style, Super Mario Bros. Wonder has a different art style, like even more extreme, like Yoshi's Crafted World and Yoshi's Woolly World, which is actually more similar to Paper Mario on that aspect, are undeniably still a part of the Mario world. So I really don't think Paper Mario kind of having those papery visuals really takes away from it at all. Honestly, in my opinion, I just think it makes the games look better, and it just, like, the way that the Thousand Year Door remake handled it just looks absolutely incredible. And it also keeps a lot of the aspects that made the original version of the Thousand Year Door so good visually. Like, it keeps a lot of the, like, textured surfaces, rather than having, like, a bunch of, like, paper cutouts kind of glued together to kind of resemble a texture. I like the way that the Thousand Year Door does it, kind of making it kind of cartoony and papery at the same time. I think it's the perfect blend, in my opinion. Like, another thing that it does is kind of have these, like, little cutout effects on the characters. You've probably seen it on, like, a lot of the thumbnails that I make that has, like, Mario in it in the Thousand Year Door style, or if you've played the Thousand Year Door, they kind of have, like, a little tiny white outline, like, around the characters, but it's a little different, or actually a lot different than how the white outlines are kind of handled in the modern Paper Mario games, since it's more like a depth effect, like, added to each of the layers. And I think it looks really good, and it works really well. And I think, well, the white outlines, I don't think they're that bad. I think the criticism about them is definitely a little overblown, but I do think they can get a bit distracting, and I think the way that the Thousand Year Door remake handles its way of making the characters stand out works a lot better, in my opinion. So I really hope they continue to go with how the Thousand Year Door remake does it. And another thing about how the characters look is the fact that the sprites got a glow up, and actually kind of adds like a modern Paper Mario element to them. Like, while they do keep the classic designs, and I actually prefer the classic designs over the modern designs, but one element of the modern designs that it gives them is their expressions. Like, they look much more like kind of how they express in like Color Splash in Origami King, like similar expressions to that, even though it does still have the smooth animations and designs from Thousand Year Door. You kind of can see some influence from the modern games there, and I really appreciate it, and I really hope they continue to go in that direction of kind of blending the classic sprites, or classic style sprites, with the kind of modern expressions and animations and things. And another thing is a lot of the comedic cinematic moments that the modern games have can be adapted pretty well in the classic style. Like, in Origami King, or I guess like just the modern games in general, you'd have things like the Birdo moments, or like Origami King had that scene where it had like hyper-realistic water. Like, it was just really random moments. But the Thousand Year Door remake actually kind of has that to a degree. Like, that one scene where like Ghost T starts ascending but decides he wants to stay on the train, it kind of like looks like heavenly and kind of does like that overly kind of realistic style to it. Or also like even in battle, when the big blooper like shoots ink at you, the ink looks like hyper realistic, almost kind of like how the things look in Sticker Star and Color Splash. And I guess also the Legion of Stationery in Origami King. And then also things like Flurry in Introduction like looks even more cinematic. Or also like the Thousand Year Door opening kind of looks more cinematic. Like just that modern Paper Mario cinematic flair translates pretty well into Thousand Year Door. So I really think they should continue to have that style to it. I really like that cinematic thing that the modern Paper Mario games have been doing. So I really hope they continue to do that. So moving on into another kind of element of modern Paper Mario that would work really well in classic style games is the overworld. Like, this is actually one thing that the Thousand Year Door remake didn't do. I mean, it wouldn't make sense for it to do this, since, like, it makes sense that the Thousand Year Door remake really kept the same maps and things as the original game. But having worlds that are more open, like Origami King, would work really well in a new Paper Mario game in the style of the Thousand Year Door. Like, those worlds were really well designed, I would say. Like, I really like, even like the first area of the game, like when you first walk into, well, I guess after the Whispering Woods, but like once you walk into like Picnic Road, and you have this like huge sprawling area with like a lot of things to see and like walk around, like that was a pretty impactful moment. And that's like, honestly, that scene of Picnic Road, that one room, that first room that you walk into, that is like the perfect Paper Mario room, in my opinion. Like, that's what I think of when I'm like, a Paper Mario game should be more open like Origami King. The image of Picnic Road from Origami King just pops into my head. Like, boom, that is the perfect scene to work in like a Thousand Year Door style game. Like, I want to see like most of the rooms in the game look like that. And I mean, it gets even bigger than that. Like, with the Scorching Sandpaper Desert in Origami King, that was a huge area. It's like almost, I guess it's a little bit of a stretch to call that open world, but it was pretty large. And I think on the Switch too, like a new Paper Mario game could definitely have like pretty large open areas. I don't think they need to go full open world, but like honestly, if a new Paper Mario game had like each chapter that was segmented into like one map per area that was like about the size of roughly like Pokemon Legends Arceus' maps. Okay, I'm really sorry for that one guy who watches my videos who hates Pokemon Legends Arceus, but that's the only comparison I could think of. But like worlds like around the size of that, just as a visual, I think that's possibly what they could do. So like a little bigger than the Scorching Sandpaper Desert, but I think that would look just really nice. And I really like being able to walk around and like do different things. And one thing that I think they should do to kind of add on to that is kind of have Thousand Year Doors mechanics, like overworld mechanics and things like the curses or the partner abilities, like have all of those things disposable to you in this huge open area. Like have a ton of little puzzles that you can solve to get like different collectibles or find different enemies or get different things. Like, they could do so much with that, like with combining Thousand Year Doors mechanics into that overworld. And I also like the element of Origami King, like being pretty interconnected, like even more so than Thousand Year Door, like being able to walk between different areas. I know there were like a few vehicles that you would have to go on, like that one, like tram to get over to like the Autumn Mountain, or like using the boat to get over to, like the desert area, and I guess Shogun Studios as well. While those are fine, I think it's cool to be able to like walk from one area to the other. So I kind of want to see more of that in like a future Paper Mario game. And then another thing about the overworld is Color Splash's and Origami King's mechanic of filling in the areas of the map with like paint or confetti. I thought that was pretty fun, and I think that's definitely compatible with a classic a classic style Paper Mario game. I think it's pretty fun. I like how Origami King did it, like where you could actually like fill in areas that you need to get to, like some that have like collectibles or like objects or like I think they should lead into that even more. Like certain areas that you normally can't get to unless you fill it in. I think that was really nice. But also, they could maybe even tie it into like the actual like overall mechanics of like battle. Like maybe it's like an FP element as well, kind of like paint that's depleting. So you have that resource management element of it as well. And I'll get into that in a little bit when I talk about battles. But kind of combining Color Splashes and Origami King's way of doing that, maybe even making that resource more scarce. Maybe making it to where like you could only get it if you like fight an enemy or like hit certain objects. I mean, maybe make the primary way of getting this resource from enemies. Maybe they could do something like that. I think that would be pretty cool. But moving on, another thing I'd like to see, kind of tying into the overworld, is the collectibles from Origami King. I really want to see something like that return. I was actually a little disappointed that the Thousand Year Door remake didn't do something like that. I mean, I guess that would have conflicted with the idea of the remake being, like, very faithful to the original. But at the same time, I still think it would have worked. But I definitely think that, like, I mean, it's kind of obvious. It's just collectibles. That would definitely work really well within the context of, like, a classic Paper Mario style game. We've even seen a classic Paper Mario game do something fairly similar with Super Paper Mario having the catch cards. I know that technically kind of played into the gameplay as well, but that was technically a collectible mechanic, kind of, or thing in the game that you could do. But I'd like to see something like that. I really liked Origami King's collectibles, so seeing that, but in a game with, like, more original characters would be really nice. And maybe even have some collectibles that reference past games as well. I think that was, like, a missed opportunity with Origami King, since Super Paper Mario did have, like, cards that reference the past games. But that's kind of besides the point. But moving on, this is one very specific thing, but I like that little element. I guess this is technically, like, also a visual thing, but I like the tape that you could just peel off of things that kind of, like, uncovered something. It almost works similar to how Thousand Year Door had, like, switches in some areas that, like, uncovered, like, a staircase or, like, a platform or something. Like, the tape works in very similar ways to that, where you kind of, like, tear it off and it like uncovers something. I kind of like that. I don't know. It's just very specific. I like the peeling animation in Sticker Star. That was like one of the only smooth animations in that game. I don't know. It's just a satisfying animation. It's just really weird. It's just really specific. But I'd like to see that return. It would have been really funny if the Thousand Year Door remake had like Rotus tape or something like that. But I'd like to see more like with the original villain like slapped over it rather than just Bowser tape. Like I know Origami King had the Ollie tape, so I want to see more of that. I know it's very specific, but that's just something that I want to see. And another thing is actually kind of pretty surprising, especially coming from me. And that is the story. I actually think there are some elements from the modern games, like story-wise, that could work well in the classic games. Like Origami King had some great characters despite their design limitations, and I'd love to see more partners with a lot of depth and personality. Like, I've seen some people in the past say that they should make the partners temporary because of that, but I don't think they really need to do that. Because, like, in moments where the partner is relevant, they could just pull them out, or have more moments like Chapter 4 in Thousand Year Door, where Mario temporarily only has one partner. I think they could do more things like that. But also, like, focusing on moment-to-moment scenarios would be nice, kind of like Origami King and Color Splash, but I'd still like to see a good overarching story like Thousand Year Door and Super Paper Mario. I think it's good to have a balance between the two. But finally, I wanted to talk about kind of the big thing that I was talking about in the last video, and that is, like, more of the gameplay elements with the gimmicks. I don't think the Paper Mario series needed to completely throw out the old battle system in order to innovate. I think that the classic style battle system is definitely compatible with gimmicks. I still see people saying that they don't want every game to feel like Thousand Year Door, but I really don't think that would be the case. Paper Mario The Thousand Year Door already felt a lot different than 64's battle system with the addition of the audience, partner HP, partners being able to use items, stylish moves, and super guarding. And then the Mario & Luigi series also doesn't change its battle system much between games, and finds ways to innovate, like having things like the Babies, Bowser, Dreamy Luigi, Paper Mario, and most recently the Battle Plugs. And so many RPG series such as Xenoblade, the Mother series, keep core elements of their battle system intact, yet each entry still feels fresh. So instead of changing the battle system completely, I feel like they could add gimmicks onto the battle system without making things too weird, and still keeping what made the older battle systems fun. Like, Color Splash's paint system would have worked really well as a replacement to FP, kind of like how I was talking about earlier with, like, the paint confetti thing in the Overworld. Like, in battle, Color Splash's paint would essentially work like FP, like, as long as they don't give too much to you and make battles pointless, make it more limited, and kind of have a more flexible FP system where certain moves could only use certain colors, or it uses, like, you could fill a certain move up to, like, a certain amount. I think that would work really well if it was implemented with the classic badge system and everything. And even, like, really little things, like Origami King's wave battles, I feel like that's something that should return. Kind of being able to fight, like, multiple waves of enemies within a battle. That could have worked in the Thousand Year Door remake, but I guess that would have been a little too much, of, like, a new thing there. But they could even lean into the resource management system of the modern games and have a crafting gimmick. Like, I'm not sure if I'd want that to replace badges. Like, they could have, like, craftable badges and things, but maybe have it to where there's, like, an incentive to fight enemies, and enemies, like, drop certain materials for crafting certain weapons. That would be really cool. And they could keep a lot of the Thousand Year Door mechanics, like, along with that. Or even, like, a gimmick based on the action commands, like moves that use the mouse controls of the Switch 2, or like rhythm-based action commands like Mother 3. I think that would be, well, I mean, like Mother 3, like it would have like a rhythm game-esque element to its battle system. That's kind of what I meant there. But the battle system can still have gimmicks, but can simultaneously keep what people loved about the older battle system. Like, keep things like badges in the older action command, well, unless they do something gimmicky with the action commands. Just, like, keep a lot of those elements that people liked about the Thousand Year Door battle system, but just, like, add something onto it. I see some people say that they want Paper Mario to solely focus on gimmicks, but I don't really see the harm of keeping the older system intact. I'd rather have a game that pleases most people, like how the Thousand Year Door remake did, than a game that was more divisive and only pleases some people, like the Origami King. Like, I liked Origami King, but there were a lot of elements that I would have liked to be different. I would have preferred if it was more like the Thousand Year Door, even though I do like a lot of the elements that that game brings to the table. So I'd rather have a game that is more like a compromise than a game that is like more like the modern games, or like exactly like the Thousand Year Door. I mean, if the game was like too similar to the Thousand Year Door, then yeah, I can kind of see the point of it being like a little boring and not innovating enough. But realistically, I feel like the next game is probably going to be a compromise of the two. So I really don't think there's any point in like arguing like, it is going to be exactly like Origami King, or it is going to do some completely new gimmick. Like, I really don't think it's gonna do anything like that. Like, I really don't see the point in doing that at this point, because I feel like that would alienate quite a large audience. Like, the Thousand Year Door remake sold over 2 million at this point, which is like nearly 70% of what Origami King sold, even though it didn't outsell Origami King. Like, I mean, I don't really think it needed to outsell Origami King, because this is a remake released late in the Switch era. I feel like Nintendo definitely saw the context of it and still treats it as a success, and probably thinks it's just as successful as Origami King was. So, I think making a new Paper Mario game that just throws ideas at the wall to see if they stick, and completely abandoning the older style, would still alienate quite a large audience. So, I really think they should kind of make a compromise between the classic style and the modern style. I just think that makes a lot of sense. Like, a game that has the battle system of Thousand Year Door, a story that mixes elements of Thousand Year Door and Origami King, the world design of Origami King, some of the overworld gimmicks of, like, Origami King, but characters along the lines of, like, Thousand Year Door, since the franchise does seem to be getting more creative again. But yeah, that's kind of how I feel about this. Like, I really feel like a compromise is necessary. But yeah, anyways, thank you guys for watching this video. Make sure to leave a like and subscribe for more. And make sure to check out my Discord server and Blue Sky if you want to. Stay perky!